She said she'd rather go to prison than pay me back. Those were her exact words, trembling but defiant, her lawyer sitting right beside her like a nervous shadow. I remember staring across the table at my own daughter, my child, my blood, and feeling something I didn't recognize at first. It wasn't anger. It wasn't betrayal. It was disbelief, raw. Choking disbelief that the same girl I once carried in my arms was now fighting me in court over $500,000. And when her lawyer accidentally revealed that she owed nearly twice that amount to people I'd never even heard of, the room fell silent, as if all the air had been vacuumed out. That was the moment I realized I didn't know my daughter at all. It hadn't started with money. It never does. It started with love hors illusion. Of it, at least. Emily was always bright, always headstrong. As a child, she questioned everything, my rules. Her teachers, the very concept of can't. Her mother used to say she had fire in her veins. That she'd either build empires or burn them down. I suppose we both were right. When her mother passed away during Emily's second year of college, I tried to be strong for her. I paid her tuition, sent her extra money every month, told her to focus on her studies and her dreams. I didn't ask questions when she switched majors from engineering to business, or when she started posting pictures of herself at parties in Manhattan penthouses, smiling beside people whose names I'd never heard before, but whose watches cost more than my car. She called me less and less. Our conversations became brief, polite. Exchanges, rehearsed almost. I'm doing fine. Dad, don't worry. Classes are great. I've got a few projects going. Then a laugh, a quick love you, and the line would go dead. I assumed she was growing into her own life, that this was just part of parenthood, the slow drifting apart. I was even if premier didn't word shoot, until the first request for money came. Dad, I just need a short-term loan. I'm closing on a small investment with a couple of friends, and the timing's tight. I can pay you back in 3 months, I promise. She sounded confident. Her voice carried that same conviction I used to admire in her as a little girl. I wired her $25,000 without hesitation. She called me the next day, laughing and breathless, thanking me like I'd just saved her life. 3 months turned into 6. 6 turned into 12. I told myself she was busy, that she'd make good on her word. Premier did not need the money. Immediately I just needed her honesty. The next request came a year later, this time with urgency. Dad, please, this one's different. I've got investors, real ones this time. I can double your money in months. I hesitated. Something about her voice had changed to polished, to persuasive. She was selling me something, not confiding in me, but the memory of her mother's face in that hospital bed stopped me from saying no. I wired her $100,000, then another $50,000 2 months later, then another. By the time I realized what was happening, I was into deep. I asked her to show me paperwork, investment documents, anything that proved she wasn't being scammed or worse, scamming others. Je proto. Send them, said she'd drive down the following weekend to talk in person. She never came. Instead, I got a call from a man who introduced himself as David, one of her business partners. He said Emily had been temporarily unavailable, but assured me everything was under control. His tone was oily. Rehearsed, 'tis smooth. That night, I drove 3 hours to her apartment in Brooklyn. She wasn't there. The place was empty, half furnished, scattered clothes, a couple of unpaid bills on the counter. There was a framed photo of her and me from her high school graduation, lying face down on the floor. I sat on her couch, trying to piece it all together, when her neighbor knocked on the door. A young guy, mid-20s, said he'd seen her leave too. Days ago, with a couple of friends, carrying duffel bags. She said she was heading out of town for a bit. Didn't say where. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation, every message, every red flag I'd ignored. The next morning, I called her number. It went straight to voicemail. I texted her. Nothing. 2 weeks later, I got a letter not from her, but from Erloy. Itwa Polit Enton. Miss Carter requests that all communications concerning financial disputes be directed through our office. Financial disputes. My daughter had reduced our relationship to a transaction. I called the lawyer's office immediately. He refused to discuss details, citing confidentiality, but something in his voice pinned me. Montpassé, then came the lawsuit. When the papers arrived, I thought it was a mistake. She was suing me for $500,000, claiming that the money I'd given her was not a loan, but an investment in a joint business venture gone wrong. She accused me of breaching a verbal agreement to contribute further funds. I remember sitting in my kitchen, holding those pages, my coffee growing cold, my hands trembling. The Tralzine's a G. Legal jargon it was in the fact that she'd weaponized my love, turned it into a liability. I hired my own lawyer, a quiet, sharp man named Harris. He asked for every document, every text, every receipt. We'll prove she's lying, he said. But I need to know everything. I gave him everything I had, every transfer, every message. When we finally sat across from her and her lawyer during mediation, I almost didn't recognize her. Emily wore a grey suit, her hair pulled back, her expression carved in stone. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Then it happened. Her lawyer, a nervous young man named Bell, accidentally mentioned her outstanding debts to private lenders, to credit cards, to something called Sunbrook Holdings, over $700,000 in total. The words slipped out mid-sentence, and I saw her flinch, just for a second. Then she composed herself again, but it was too late. Harris caught it immediately, and I felt the truth crash down like cold water. My daughter wasn't a victim. She wasn't desperate. She was drowning, and she'd been dragging me down with her. The meeting ended abruptly. Harry Sewidi reconvened, verbally disclosed financial matters. I didn't say a word as I stood and walked out. I could feel her eyes on me, but I didn't turn back. Outside, the air was thick with summer heat. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at my hands, trying to remember the last time she'd hugged me without an ulterior motive. I couldn't. All I could hear were her words from earlier that day. I'd rather go to prison than pay you back, and for the first time, I believed her. I didn't drive home that night. I couldn't. The highway stretched ahead like an accusation, endless and hollow, each mile marker whispering that I had failed her, failed as a father, failed as a man. Instead, I pulled over at a rest stop just outside Albany and sat there until dawn, watching the trucks roll by, listening to the hum of engines and the occasional crackle of a distant radio. Somewhere between 2 cups of stale coffee and the first orange streaks of sunrise, I realized I'd been living in denial for years. Emily hadn't changed overnight. She had been changing slowly, invisibly, while I was too wrapped in nostalgia to see it. The next day, Harris called. "We've got leverage now," he said. His voice was cool, confident. "If what her lawyer said about the debts is true, we can force a full financial disclosure. On the court sees her situation. Her claim will collapse. I wanted to feel relief. Instead, I felt sick. Leverage, he said, like we were talking about a business deal. Not my daughter. Do it, told him. Me was didn't he sign. For weeks, the case sat in limbo, while both sides gathered documents. The silence was heavier than any argument could have been. Then one morning, as I was mowing the lawn, I saw a silver car pull into my driveway. Emily stepped out, dressed in jeans and a white blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. For a moment, she looked like the girl I used to know. "Dad," she called softly. I killed the engine and wiped the sweat from my forehead. "You've got some nerve showing up here." She flinched but didn't back away. "I need to explain. I think you've done enough explaining through your lawyer. Please," she said, her voice breaking. Just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I led her to the porch. She sat across from me, eyes darting everywhere, except my face. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she began. "The money, it was supposed to fix things, not make them worse." "Fix what?" "Première asquette, à mamie." Voice sharper than I intended. She hesitated. "You don't understand what it's like in that world, Dad. Everyone's chasing something, funding, partnerships, connections. If you slow down, even for a second, they eat you alive. I thought I could keep up, and instead, you borrowed from loan sharks," I said. Her eyes widened. "He told you?" "Here." Lawyer told me, by accident. $700,000, Emily. 700. How did you even? She buried her face in her hands. It wasn't supposed to go that far. The first loan was just $50,000. They said I could pay it back in a month after one deal closed. But the deal fell apart and they added interest, then another loan to cover the first one. Then anote. I kept thinking I could dig myself out by suing me. Her shoulders trembled. They threatened me. Dad said if I didn't come up with something fast, they'd come after you. I panicked. I thought if I made it look like a business dispute, they'd think the money was tied up in court. I didn't know what else to do. I stared at her, trying to find the lie. But what I saw instead was fear real, bone-deep fear. The kind that comes from knowing you've gone too far down a road to ever come back. Who are these people? I asked quietly. She hesitated again, then whispered, Sunbrook Holdings. The name made my stomach tighten. I'd seen it before, buried in some of the documents Harris had reviewed. It wasn't a legitimate firm. It was a front, a network of predatory lenders who operated in the grey space between legality and outright crime. You realize these people could ruin you, I said. I know, she whispered. They already have. We sat in silence for a long time. The cicadas buzzed in the trees, the air thick and still. I wanted to reach across the table, to pull her into a hug, too. Tell her we'd figure it out together, but a part of me couldn't move. Not yet. Why didn't you come to me before it got this bad? I finally asked. She looked up, her eyes red. Because I knew what you'd say. You'd tell me at either Madmivev, and you'd write. I didn't want you to see what I'd become. There it was, the truth I'd been afraid to. Here, my daughter wasn't just drowning in debt. She was drowning in shame. I can fix this, I said, surprising myself. But you need to tell me everything. Every name, every payment, every threat. If these people are who I think they are, they won't stop until they get what they want. Her lips trembled. You'd help me, after everything. You're still my daughter. The words came out like a confession. She started to cry then, quietly, the kind of crying that comes from exhaustion, not sadness. I reached across the table and took her hand. For a moment, the years between us disappeared. But then her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and all the color drained from her face. Who is it? I asked. She didn't answer. She stood, fumbling with her keys. I have to go, Emily. Please, Dad, don't follow me. She was trembling now. If they think I talk to you, it'll only make it worse. She ran to her car before I could stop her. Gravel scattered under her tires as she sped down the driveway. I stood there, helpless, watching the dust settle in the wake of her departure. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my phone. Première one testo. Call Harris. Tell him everything, she'd said, but something in my gut told me not to, not yet. Instead, I searched for Sunbrook Holdings. Most of the results were vague, shadowy, references shell, companies, offshore accounts, untraceable, management, structures. But one article caught my eye. Businessman found dead after dispute with Sunbrook affiliate. Mi bloodra. Cold. The next morning, I called Emily. No answer. I texted her. Nothing. Then, 2 days later, a message arrived not from her, but from an unknown number. Stay out of it. She's ours. No signature. No context. Just that one line. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival. I took a screenshot of the message before deleting it from my phone. My hand shook as I stared at the glowing screen. The words still burned into my mind. She's ours. It felt like something out of a nightmare, one of those dreams where you try to shout, but no, sound comes out. Where you're running through water while something terrible closes in. Except this wasn't a dream. This was my daughter. I drove straight to Harris's office that morning. He looked up from his desk as I came in, unannounced. Mr. Carter, good morning. I wasn't expecting. I threw the phone down in front of him. Read that. He adjusted his glasses, scrolled through the photo, and frowned. Where did this come from? An unknown number. They're threatening me. Or her. Or both. He leaned back, rubbing his temple. Sunbrook Holdings. Emutored. I've heard whispers about them hard to pin down legally, but they're tied to private, lending outfits that operate overseas. They use shell companies to move funds through real estate and crypto. It's organized, but barely legal. They have my daughter. I said, my voice low and shaking. Emily, you know that she's scared. I know she ran. And now I get this. I pointed at the phone. You tell me what I'm supposed to think, he sighed. Let's not jump to conclusions. Give me 24 hours. I'll have one of my contacts in financial crimes look into this, but 24 hours was too long. That night, I couldn't sit still. The house, though heavy wheat. Everything unsaid. I poured myself a drink, then another, staring at the photo of Emily on the mantel, her graduation picture, her smile bright, her eyes alive. I wanted to hate her for what she'd done, but I couldn't because beneath the anger was something deeper. Guilt. I'd been so proud of her independence that I'd stopped watching. I'd stopped being her father when she needed me most. At midnight, I called her again, still no answer. I tried her best friend, Clara girl I'd met a few times back when Emily was in college. Mr. Carter? Clara's voice was groggy but wary. Is everything okay? Have you heard from Emily? A pause. Not in a while. Maybe a month. She's been weird, posting old photos, disappearing. For days. Why? She's in trouble. Clara, big trouble. If she reaches out to you, please tell me immediately. Of course, Clara said softly. But, Mr. Carter, if she's mixed up with those people, maybe you shouldn't get involved. Those people. She knew something. What do you mean by those people? I pressed, but her tone changed instantly. Guarded. I shouldn't have said anything. I just know she was meeting with some men a few months back. Said they were investors. One of them, her voice cracked. Clara? I have to go, she said quickly. Just be careful. Then the line went dead. By morning, I'd made up my mind. Harris could have his 24 hours if he wanted. I was done waiting. Première starte 8. Her bank, years of being her guarantor, on certain accounts still gave me limited access to her statements. What I found made my stomach twist. Large cash withdrawals, transfers to untraceable payment processors, and deposits from entities with names like STH Logistics and Renford Consulting. Both were connected through layers of corporate obfuscation to Sunbrook Holdings. She wasn't just borrowing. She was laundering money. At least, that's what it looked like on paper. I printed everything out and sat at my dining table, surrounded by bank statements and notes, when a knock came at the door. It was sharp, deliberate 3 times, then silence. I froze. The kind of stillness that only comes when your instincts whisper that. Something is very wrong. Another knock. I opened the door slowly. 2 men stood on the porch, one tall and lean, the other shorter, broader, with a shaved head. Both wore dark suits, no ties. The tall one smiled politely. Mr. Carter. Yes, good morning, said. Iton calm. Omornly. We're looking for your daughter, Emily. She's not here. The shorter man's smile didn't reach his eyes. You sure about that? I straightened. Who are you? We're friends of hers. The tall one said smoothly. She's gotten herself into a bit of a situation. We're just trying to help her out by sending threatening messages to her father. That wiped the smile off his face. The shorter one stepped closer. You don't want to get in the middle of this, old man. Let your Our job. Your job? I asked, my pulse thudding. And what job is that? Exactly. The tall one sighed, as if I were wasting his time, recovering assets. That's all. Emily borrowed money that wasn't hers to borrow. Now it's right she's Sylvie team not, she gave a thin smile. Everyone's someone's property, Mr. Carter. I shut the door in their faces. Look, Edith. Then I went straight to the living room window and watched them walk back to their black sedan. The taller man turned once, his expression unreadable, then got in. They drove away slowly, like a promise. For the rest of the day, I kept expecting the sound of that knock again. It didn't come. But that night, as I walked out to take the trash to the curb, I saw it tucked under the windshield wiper of my car. A white envelope. No name, no address. Inside was a single photograph, Emily, sitting in a car, staring out the window. Her expression blank, her hands clasped tightly, in her lap. And scrawled in black ink across the bottom were 3 words, she owes more. I stood there under the streetlight, the night air cold against my skin, my heart beat loud in my ears. They'd been watching me, watching her. And suddenly, it hit me if they knew where I lived, they knew where she'd been. The question wasn't if they'd find her, it was when. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every hum of the refrigerator sounded like footsteps, whispers, danger approaching. I sat in the dark living room, the photo of Emily on the coffee table, my father's old revolver, in my hand, a relic I hadn't touched in decades. Back when it was just for show, a symbol of protection. Now, it was the only thing between me and the faceless men who said my daughter owed more. When dawn finally broke, I made a decision I couldn't unmake. I called Harris, but he didn't answer. I called again, voicemail. He was probably still asleep, unaware that everything had escalated beyond legal strategy. I grabbed my keys, threw a few essentials in a bag, and got in the car. If they had her, if she was in trouble, I wasn't waiting for the system to catch up. I was going to find her myself. Her last known address was in Brooklyn, but I knew she wouldn't be there not anymore. Instead, I drove to the only place she ever went when she was scared, her mother's old cabin upstate. It was ours once, tucked away in the trees by a half-forgotten lake, where she learned to swim and where her mother used to paint. We hadn't been there in years, but some places cling to the heart even when you want to forget them. The road was nearly deserted. Autumn had started to creep into the edges of the leaves, painting them in rust and amber. I remembered the first time Emily had seen the lake freeze over. She'd been 6, in her red wool coat, spinning on the ice while her laughter echoed through the pines. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, pushing the memory away. When I reached the cabin, the driveway looked undisturbed, the gravel scattered with fallen leaves. But as I stepped closer, I saw tire tracks, fresh ones. My chest tightened. Emily! I called out, my voice echoing off the trees. No aswe. I unlocked the front door. The hinges groaned in protest, the air inside thick with dust and the faint smell of pine wood. The curtains were half-drawn, and sunlight spilled in just enough to illuminate the mess on the floor, fast food wrappers, a half-empty coffee cup, and a blanket crumpled near the fireplace. And her phone. It was lying face down on the rug, its screen cracked till faintly glowy-glotion. Première pique du tap, heart hammering. The call was from an unknown number, time-stamped an hour ago. Then, from the corner of the room, a voice whispered, "Dad." I spun around. She was standing there, pale, thin, her eyes red from crying. Her hair was tangled, her clothes rumpled. For a heartbeat, relief washed through me so strong I almost fell to my knees. "Emily," I breathed. She flinched when I stepped closer. "You should me fate." Of course I came. You don't understand. I gestured to her phone. "Who called you? Were they here?" Her voice trembled. "They know everything. About the cabin, Abu. T.U. About Mom's savings account, everything. They said if I don't pay, they'll come after you next. They already did. I pulled the photo from my jacket and handed it to her. Her face drained of color. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They were outside last night." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away, forcing herself to stay composed. "It's not just Sunbrook anymore," she said. "They sold the debt to someone worse, a man named Keller. He doesn't care about contracts or repayment schedules. He takes what he wants." I sat down heavily on the couch. "Then we go to the police." She shook her head violently. "You don't get it. Keller owns cops. He's paid them off. If I talk, I disappear. Emily, no!" She shouted, startling even herself. "You think I haven't tried?" "I went to Alauya. Dad, not Bella, different one. I thought he could help restructure the loans. 2 days later, his office burned down. They said it was electrical. It wasn't. The silence that followed was suffocating." She sank to the floor, curling her knees to her chest. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad," she said softly. "I just wanted to prove I could make something of myself. I didn't want to be your charity case." I crouched through brambles and over fallen logs with practiced ease. I followed close, every sense sharpened by adrenaline and fear. "Why are you helping her?" I asked after a while. He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "Because I used to work for Keller. I know what he does to people who can't pay. I've seen it." He glanced at me. "And I've got a daughter too." We reached a ridge overlooking the quarry and Ourlate. From above, it looked like a wound in the earth, abandoned machinery, rusted containers, and a makeshift warehouse built near the center. 3 SUVs were parked outside. That's it, Russo said, pulling a pair of binoculars from his bag. See the guys by the gate? They're armed. Keller's probably inside. Where's Emily? He scanned for a moment, then froze. There, I took the binoculars. She was being led out of one of the containers by 2 men, her hands bound, her hair tangled. She looked terrified but alive. They pushed her toward the warehouse. My stomach turned to ice. We don't have time. Russo pulled out his phone. I've got a friend in the state police. If we can get a signal, they'll kill her by the time anyone gets here, I said. He swore under his breath. Really are her father. We made our move just as the clouds rolled in. The light dimmed and thunder grumbled in the distance. Using the noise as cover, we slipped down the hill and cut through the tree line until we were behind the compound. Russo found a gap in the fence and motioned for me to follow. The smell hit me first diesel, sweat, something metallic and sour. We crouched behind a stack of barrels, watching the guards circle lazily. To by the door, another near the SUVs, all armed. Russo pulled a knife from his boot. We take the one by the cars first. Quietly, I nodded, though my heart was slamming it in my chest. I'd never killed anyone, never even wanted to, but the thought of Emily in that building changed everything. Russo moved like a ghost, slipping behind the guard and cutting his throat before the man could make a sound. I caught the body, lowering it to the ground. My stomach churned, but I forced it down. We rush at the warehouse door. Russo cracked it open just enough to peer inside. Keller's there, he whispered, middle of the room. Emily's tied to a chair. I looked. The man standing before her was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black. His hair was silver at the temples, his movements deliberate. He spoke to her in a low voice I couldn't hear, but whatever, he said. Made her flinch. Russo pulled out his phone, started typing. I'm sending our coordinates to my contact. Y fuego doon at least someone nowhere. Deep breath. We going quiet. But before we could move, the warehouse door behind us creaked open and a voice said, going somewhere, gentlemen. We turned. It was Vance, the same tall man from the cabin. Only this time, he wasn't smiling. He raised a pistol, its suppressor glinting in the dim light. Keller wants a word with you. Old man, Russo lunged first. The gun went off a dull asterisk thud asterisk and Russo grunted, falling to one knee. I fired back, hitting Vance in the shoulder. He stumbled, cursed, and fired again. The shot tore past my ear, close enough that I felt the heat. Russo yelled, "Go! Get her!" before slamming into Vance, dragging him to the ground. Te grapplé, across the concrete. I cut door and ran inside. Keller turned at the sound, eyes narrowing. "Emily!" I shouted. She looked up, eyes wide, tears streaking her face. "Dad!" Keller smiled, calm and cold. The investor himself. He reached into his jacket and I didn't think. I just fired. The bullet hit him in the chest. He staggered back, shock crossing his face before he fell, the gun slipping from his hand. I ran to Emily, cutting the ropes. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, sobbing. No, I'm okay." Then another gunshot echoed behind me. I turned just in time to see Russo collapse in the doorway, blood blooming across his shirt. Vance stood over him, bleeding from the shoulder but alive, raising the gun again. I fired first. He fell without a sound. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of rain beginning to fall on the tin roof, soft and steady, like the world itself was trying to wash away the blood. Emily clung to me, trembling. "It's over," she whispered. But as I looked down at Keller's lifeless body, something in me knew better. Men like him didn't work alone, and debts like hers didn't die that easily. We left the quarry just before dawn, the rain having settled into a slow, relentless drizzle that slicked the roads and made every mile feel longer than it should have been. Emily sat in the passenger seat, silent, staring out the window. Her reflection in the glass looked ghostly in the half-light pale, drawn and distant. I wanted to speak, to tell her it was over, that she was safe now. But the words stuck in my throat because I didn't believe them. Russo was dead. Keller and Vance were dead. And even though the warehouse was empty when we drove away, I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Someone would come looking. Someone always did. You shouldn't have come for me, Emily said finally, her voice hoarse. I didn't have a choice. You had every choice. She turned toward me, her eyes red but fierce. You could have called the police. You could have let me deal with it. I gripped the wheel tighter. They would have killed you, Emily. She looked down, her fingers tracing the cracks in the dashboard. And now they'll come after Asterisk you. Asterisk I didn't answer, because she was right. We reached the edge of town just as the sky began to lighten. I pulled into an old, Mattel the kind with flickering, neon signs and a vending machine that looked like it hadn't worked since the 90s. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and dust. The clerk barely looked up as I paid cash for a room. Once we were inside, Emily collapsed onto the bed. I sat on the edge of the other, staring at my hands. They were shaking. Comme nos femmes firent voir what I'd done. I had killed 2 men. Even if it was self-defense, even if they were monsters, the weight of it pressed on my chest like a stone. The sound of the gunfire still echoed in my head, sharp and final. I called Harris, I said quietly, left him a message. He'll know what to do. She didn't respond. After a moment, she said, Dad, I need to tell you something. Her tone made me look up. She wasn't crying anymore. There was something else in her eyes, now something colder. When I first got involved with Sunbrook, she said, it wasn't just because I needed money. I thought I could beat them at their own game. I had a plan. Keller wasn't just lending me money, he was investing in something I built. What do you mean, something you built? She hesitated. A shell network. Offshore accounts, crypto exchanges, fake businesses. It started as a way to move money for clients without taxes. Then Keller found out. I told him no, so he made me say yes. My pulse quickened. You're saying you still have access to those accounts? She nodded slowly. Yes, and not just mine. Keller's too. When he made me move his money, I kept records, wallet keys, transaction IDs, backups, everything. I stared at her, the realization hitting me like a jolt. Emily, how much? She swallowed. If we can unlock it. Over 6 million. For a long time, I didn't speak. I just sat there, listening to the rain hammer against the window. You realize what that means, don't you? I said finally. Someone's going to come looking for it. She nodded. They already are. Keller wasn't the top. There's someone above him. A man named Marlowe. Nobody's ever seen him, but Keller used to say that if you hear his name, you're already dead. The room seemed smaller suddenly, the air heavier. Then we need to disappear, I said. Now, she shook her head. It's not that simple. The money's locked in multiple wallets, tied to a dead man's biometric keys, Keller's. Without those, it's useless. But Marlowe doesn't know that yet. He'll assume I took it. I stood and started pacing. Then we find a way to convince him you didn't. She gave a bitter laugh. You can't reason with a man like that. I stopped. You sound like you've met him. Her silence was answer enough. Emily, I said carefully, have you? Je looked up and saw something right in her eyes. Once, she whispered, a year ago, in London. He came to one of Keller's meetings. No introduction, no entourage. He just asterisk appeared. Asterisk everyone went silent. He told Keller that loyalty wasn't about fear, it was about ownership. Then he looked at me and said, remember that, sweetheart. Because you're not free anymore. Her voice broke on the last word. I sat down beside her and took her hand. You're free now, I said, but she shook her head. You don't understand. Men like Marlowe don't stop. If he thinks I have his money, he'll hunt me to the ends of the earth. Then we make him believe you're dead. She looked at me sharply. What? It's the only way. You disappear, completely new name, new identity, no contact. Harris can help us set it up. You go off the grid, start over, and you. I'll stay behind, clean up the mess. No, she said immediately. If anyone stays, it's me. I caused this. I'm not arguing with you, Emily. I've already lost your mother. I'm not losing you too. Her eyes filled with tears again, but she didn't argue. That night, while she slept, I sat by the window, the revolver resting on the table beside me. I couldn't sleep. Every shadow outside felt like movement, every sound like a car pulling up. I saw a flash brief across them tell, lot and then vanish. The next morning, the phone rang. It wasn't Harris. A man's voice, smooth and calm, said, Mr. Carter, you have something that belongs to me. My throat went dry. Who is this? A soft chuckle. You already know. Keller was sloppy. X en terminaux. Bring me the girl and what she took, and this ends cleanly. Refuse, and I'll make sure she dies slower than Keller did. The line went dead. I looked at Emily. She was awake now, her eyes wide with fear. Was that? Yes, I said. She didn't ask how I knew. She didn't have to. Because in that moment, we both understood. Keller was just the beginning. And Marlowe was already coming. The call had been polite. Surgical Marlowe's voice measured, like a man who treats threats as currency and, when it ended the room, felt colder. As if the walls had taken on the weight of his words. Emily covered her face with both hands and cried, not the ragged, sobs of the broken, but the low. Animal, sounds of someone who has spent nights counting the hours until waking and found only dread. I sat in the motel chair and watched her. Feeling older than the motel bedspread and more useless than the telephone on the nightstand. We don't have time for schemes, she said finally, lifting her head. Her hair was a tangle, her eyes raw. If he thinks I ran with the money, he'll send guys who don't ask questions, so we tell him the truth, I said, and heard how foolish I sounded. We hand it over. We get him to the table. And then he kills you anyway. She cut in. He doesn't negotiate. He owns outcomes. You think Keller died because he was sloppy. He died because he pissed Marlowe off. That's a different kind of ownership. There was a tremor in her voice that I hadn't heard before. Resignation, braided with resolve. I thought of her mother, how she'd smoothed Emily's hair when the world felt too loud, how she'd whispered that love was not always enough to protect the ones you loved from themselves. I realized then how little I understood the systems my daughter had stepped into. How naive I'd been to think money was the only battlefield. Okay, I said, then we fake it. We create a corpse. The words tasted wrong, even as I said them. We make Marlowe see what he wants to see. She laughed, a brittle sound. You can't simply make a corpse, Dad. Maybe not. I rubbed my face. But I know people who can. Lawyers who know cleaners, secure storage. Harris can arrange an identity. We create a death certificate, a funeral, a paper trail. You disappear to an island or a town nobody Googles. No flights with your name. We burn the past. How long? Shusk. Long enough. I kept my voice steady, because steadiness was the only thing she had left to cling to. Her method wasn't that simple. Marlowe wasn't a man content with a closed file. He would sniff for inconsistencies. He would use friends in high places, servers in jurisdictions with no cooperation agreements. He would want certainty. That certainty required more than paperwork. It required convincing the right people. It required money real, clean money that could buy silence, create documents, and fund a life hidden behind a new name. The gulf between we had and what we needed yawned, wide and ugly. You said you have access, I said, the sentence a blade. Emily's lips were a thin line. I do. I left traps in Keller's infrastructure backdoors and ledger, fragments. It will buy us time, not the whole sum, but it's a start. Time from what? Time to disappear. Her fingers tugged at the motel blanket. And to set a honey trap. Marlowe wants proof. He'll come for it. We can feed him a shadow, a ledger that points him somewhere that will cost him his people, his money more than he wants to lose to get me back. You mean lure him? She looked at me like I'd finally said the first smart thing. Exactly. He thinks he's omnipotent. He's never been inside his own house of mirrors. If we can create one that reflects him right back, he'll hesitate. If he hesitates, he can be vulnerable. It sounded insane. It sounded like a plan conjured in panic and patched together from stolen keys and the thin hope left into people who had nothing to lose. But it also sounded like a place to start. Who can help? Harris, she said, and the name on the last syllable was a prayer and a curse. He's been my lawyer's opposite. He's got contacts people who can falsify death, certificates, people who can create identities. He might be compromised, but compromise can be negotiated. I had left him a message. He hadn't answered. Now, in the cheap fluorescent light of the motel, I dialed again. The number rang and then, mercifully, clicked into pickup. Harris, he said, his voice thin. Harris, it's me. Listen, bring everything. We need to talk, and it's not for the office. I didn't tell him where we were. I didn't want to put another listening post in the chain. Mr. Carter, I bring Russo's file. Bring options for identity, for relocation. Bring any secure channels you have. And Harris, if you're compromised, tell me now. Silence. Then, I'm on my way. His hesitation had the weight of something like relief, but also the prickle of a lie. He'd been in my corner, and yet men like him make deals. I didn't trust him entirely, but we had no choice. We met that evening in a diner, on the far side of town, the kind of place with neon lighting and chipped plates. Harris slid into the booth opposite me, eyes hot quick. He smelled, faintly of old coffee and stronger compromises. You're late, I said. You called. Panic changes schedules, he replied. I laid out the situation, the messages, the quarry, Keller and Vance, Russo's body, Marlowe's phone call. I watched his face for the tell anything that would betray collusion. He nodded, his jaw tight. We can build a false death, he said. Finally! We can manufacture a fire, a body that burns beyond recognition, DNA swapped with remains from the morgue through channels. It's messy. It's expensive. And it's not permanent if someone like Marlowe insists on a private autopsy, which he might. So we need to be ready if he wants one, Emily said. He'll test it. We'll give him a test he fails, Harris said. A stage. A ledger that points toward a place that looks like worth, but it's buffered. When Imov, he moved tried to have a ghost. Harris smiled, a thin, brittle thing. By making the ghost visible, he pushed a small, battered laptop across the table. I can fabricate enough to make his people pull resources. We plant a false wallet, a wallet that will lead to a chain of servers I control. When they move, I can watch. When they move big money, we can follow it. We can follow the money to people who are tangible, and once we have one of his lieutenants with footprints in legitimate financial systems. Marlowe will have a problem bigger than us. Emily leaned forward, hope and dread mingling in her expression. And the death. Harris's eyes flicked to mine. Wait for it. The plan unfurled over the next 72 hours in a violent, hurried ballet. Harris worked channels that smelled of corruption and desperation private, mortuaries. Under-the-table coroners, men who could arrange a burned vehicle on a back road and pass it off as a tragic accident. Emily gave up the ledger, fragments she'd kept, seeds of false trails planted inside real code. I called in favors for cash, an old friend in a bank who could move sums under the radar, a neighbor who owed me a pawned favor. We staged a funeral no one wanted to attend, and the local priest who deburied more sins than souls read words that felt like betrayal to my tongue. We planted a burned sedan on a stretch of highway 3 towns east, left a charred, unrecognizable body, and found a coroner who would sign a certificate for a fee and a promise. Every piece of paper was a lie dressed as truth. When the news reached the underworld, it traveled, not like a whisper, but like a bell. Men who had been waiting for closure began to call in their chips. Marlowe's men, efficient and cruel, accepted the story. Because a dead girl meant no loose ends, and loose ends are messy, and messy ends cost power. For 3 days, nothing happened, and then everything happened at once. They came for the money Marlowe's lieutenants moved on the false wallets. Their transfers traced by Harris to a shell company, registered in a jurisdiction with teeth. Harris and I watched screens glow in a rented office while Emily sat in the back of the diner, a ghost with a paper cup. We traced the money as it hopped, and it led not to Marlowe directly, but to a bank tied to a man named Werner someone who had been on Harris' list for years, a lieutenant whose arrogance made him visible. We pulled on that thread. Werner's movements were sloppy. A private jet here, a legal business there. We followed until we found a solid piece. A wire sent to a real estate holding company with a board member who had a social life a little too publicly intertwined with politicians. I felt the world tilt as the implication sank in. If Werner's trail led to people like that, then Marlowe had built a house on pillars that could be pulled out from under him. Harris smiled then, genuinely, for the first time. We have him where we want him, he said. But celebrations are dangerous in a life like this. As the screen filled with transactions and names. My phone vibrated with an incoming call labeled unknown. I answered with the stomach-sickening certainty of someone who knows the sound of a clock before it strikes. Mr. Carter, a new voice said, cool and amused. You've been busy. My breath caught. Who is this? A soft laugh. You did well. You staged a very convincing funeral. Such care. Such creativity. But creativity doesn't buy you safety. It only buys you a seat at the table you didn't want. Who are you? I demanded. There was a pause long enough to be a sentence. Call me a friend of Marlowe's, the voice said. I only want to ask a question. Where is the girl? I did not answer, because to answer was to begin a countdown. I could not stop. The line went dead. On the other end of the diner, Emily squeezed my hand, nails digging into my skin. They know, she whispered. They don't know everything, I said, and lied as if I could will it to be true. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, the air tasted like metal. We had baited a trap, and the beast had taken the bait. The question now was whether the thing that came would be blinded by greed or sharpened by vengeance. We had started a war we could not stop. And somewhere, in the dark arteries of a city where men like Marlowe moved like kings, a decision was being made. The dawn that followed had the color of old paper thin, light filtered through a ceiling of fog. The motel room quiet, except for the breathing of a woman who had been chased out of her own life. I sat by the window again, revolver on the sill, eyes on the parking lot. The world felt smaller, as though the night had folded in around us and refused to lift. Emily woke slowly, rubbing her eyes. You didn't sleep again, she murmured. I don't remember the last time I did, I said. She sat up, the blankets slipping off her shoulders. You got the call last night. Yeah, was it him? I nodded. Not Marlowe, someone else. Said he was a friend. Her expression hardened. Not. Affriant. Only servants. Then one of his servants knows you're alive. That truth hung in the air, like smoke. I made coffee in the room's ancient machine, the kind that hissed and groaned, like it resented the work. Harris was due to meet us at noon, with whatever he'd pulled from the trap. But I already knew what he'd say, that the fake ledgers had been accessed by multiple foreign servers, that someone was moving fast, looking for holes. They'd realized they'd been fooled. Emily sat by the table, her hands wrapped around the mug. You said last night we started a war, she said quietly. You were right. I turned toward her. Wars can be won. She gave me a look that was equal parts love and pity. Not this kind. You think we can outrun them, but they own people. Dad. The kind of people who don't show up in databases. The kind who make the rules. She wasn't wrong. Still, I wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. At exactly noon, there was a knock on the door, 2 short raps, then a pause, then one more. The signal Harris had given me. I opened it to find him, standing there, pale, raincoat draped over his arm, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. May I come in? Depends, I said. You bring good news. That depends on how you family. They're moving, just like we thought, but not after you. Not yet. What do you mean? They're eating themselves. The fake wallet someone inside Marlowe's network accessed it first. Someone high enough to know what it meant. They're tearing each other apart trying to find who did. Hemlinged, so someone inside Eno dead. Looks that way. Whoever this friend was who called you, he's not bluffing. There's a fracture inside Marlowe's organization. And you both of you are the catalyst. I didn't know whether to feel relief or terror. So what happens now? Now, Harris sat, folded his hands. Now we disappear for real. While they're fighting, you vanish. The paperwork's ready. He handed me a brown envelope. 2 passports, 2 IDs. Canada first, then Iceland. From there, you can vanish anywhere you want. Emily took the envelope, her hands trembling. And you. I'll stay behind, Harris said. Someone needs to keep feeding them misinformation. If I go dark too soon, they'll know where you went. I didn't trust him, not completely, but right then. His offer sounded like salvation. We left that afternoon, driving north through empty roads, the kind that felt forgotten by time. The further we went, the fewer cars we saw, until it was just us and the whisper of tires against asphalt. Emily fell asleep against the window, and for a while, I let myself imagine that we were just father and daughter again. Driving somewhere peaceful, but peace in our story was a temporary illusion. Halfway to Arikaled, his urgent change of plan. They found me. My blood went cold. What? I don't know how. Someone leaked. Maybe that cop who signed the death certificate. Doesn't matter now. They're coming! Listen carefully, don't go to the border. They'll be watching the crossings. Head to the old ferry dock on Lake Champlain. There's a boat there, named Jolene. Keys under the seat. It'll take you across unnoticed. I wanted to ask more, but the line went dead. Emily woke at my side. What's wrong? I forced calm into my voice. New route. Harris. Said the border's hot. She studied me. He sounded scared, didn't he? Yes, we drove in silence. The sky was heavy, with storm clouds now, the kind that hung low enough to touch. When we reached the lake, the dock was deserted. The boat was there, just like Harris had said, a small motorboat, weathered and quiet. I checked out as there were Clambedin. Ewaterwa. Dark, the surface rippling, like black glass. I started the engine. It sputtered, then caught, a low hum cutting through the wind. We were halfway across when I saw them. 2 cars, black, pulling up on the opposite shore, figures stepping out. One of them lifted something, metallic binoculars or maybe a gun scope. Get down, I hissed. A second later, the first bullet hit the water beside us. Emily screamed, covering her head. I swung the boat hard, the spray hitting us in icy sheets. Another shot cracked through the air, the motor wind, the boat lurching forward. I aimed toward a narrow stretch of reeds near the opposite bank, praying we could make it before they adjusted. Then the motor coughed, sputtered, and died. Come on, I growled, yanking the starter. Nothing. Another shot tore through the hull, water spurting in. Emily grabbed my arm. Dad, swim! I shouted, grabbing the revolver and shoving her toward the edge. We hit the water together, the cold cutting through every nerve. The gunfire followed, muffled beneath the waves. We swam for the reeds, lungs burning, hearts hammering, when we finally drove ourselves to the marching. Première looked back. The boat was sinking, bubbles rising from the hole in its side. The men on the dock were shouting, pointing, but they didn't follow. Not yet. Emily collapsed beside me, gasping. They found us again. How? I didn't answer. I was staring at the opposite shore, at the flash of headlights pulling up beside the shooters. A third car. A man stepped out tall, thin, coat whipping in the wind. Even from that distance, something about him radiated calm authority. He raised a hand, and the others lowered their guns. Who is that? Emily whispered. I didn't need to ask. I already knew. It was Marlowe. He stood there for a moment, watching us through the grey haze, and even from across the lake, I could feel his eyes on me. Tenez my lids to finger on the mock salute. The message was clear. He wasn't finished. And neither were we. The next morning broke, not with sunlight, but with fog, so thick it swallowed sound. The lake was calm again, still enough to mirror the grey sky above it. Emily and I sat near the tree line, wrapped in blankets stolen from an old boathouse we'd found during the night. My revolver sat in my lap. It felt useless. Now too small, a thing to stop what was coming. She was quiet for a long time. Her face looked older than it should have at 26. Her eyes hollow. You saw him, didn't you? She whispered. I nodded. Marlowe. The name hung in the air like a curse. What happens now? She asked. We finish this, I said. She looked at me as if I were mad. Finish it how? You can't fight a man like that. I stared out across the water. No, but you can corner him. You said you still had the backup keys to his ledgers, right? She hesitated. Yes, hidden in encrypted storage, tied to a dead address, then we use it. We take everything he's got, make it public, bury him in daylight. She shook her head. He'll kill us before that happens. I turned toward her. He'll kill us anyway. If we do nothing, it was the first time I saw fire in her again, small, flickering, but alive. The same fire her mother used to call her blessing and her curse. We hiked for hours through the forest until we reached a half-collapsed ranger station near the border. A broken desk and up to connect. Silence, her fingers flying across the keyboard, eyes fixed on. Lines of code that looked like another language to me. What are you doing? I asked. Cracking the final lock, she said. If I can get inside Marlowe's primary ledger, I can reroute the transfers every payment, every transaction. He'll lose everything in one stroke. Won't that paint a target on you? She gave a sad little smile. He already painted it. Dad, outside, the wind. Picked up, the forest whispered, and somewhere in the distance, the low hum of an engine drifted closer. I checked my revolver. Hurry, she didn't answer, just kept typing. Faster now. Then, suddenly, she stopped. Got it? What do you mean, you got it? She turned the screen toward me. It's open. His main account. I can drain it. Send it to government watchdogs, journalists, anyone. Who'll publish it before? He can stop it. I could see it on her face, fear and exhilaration in equal measure. Do it. She hit enter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low beep and a cascade of messages filled the screen. Transfer initiated. Transfer complete. File sent. Emily. Her hands were trembling. It's done. I walked to the window. The sound of engines was louder now, 3, maybe for vehicles. Black SUVs cutting through the fog. They're here, I said. She didn't flinch. Then it's too late for them. The vehicles stopped at the edge of the clearing. Men stepped out armed, dressed in black. Marlowe was with them, immaculate as ever, his expression calm, unreadable. He looked up at the cabin, his eyes finding mine through the fogged glass. Then he smiled, slow and knowing. He raised a hand and everything went still. Stay behind me, I said, pulling the revolver. He walked forward alone. No gun, no guards. Just the steady crunch of boots on dead leaves. When he reached the porch, he stopped. Mr. Carter, he said, voice smooth as glass. You've caused me quite the inconvenience. You should get used to disappointment, I said. He tilted his head. You don't understand what you've done. That money wasn't mine, it was the blood of nations, debts owed and paid in silence. You've exposed not me, but them. They'll burn you before they burn me. Good, I said. Let them come. At least the world will finally first type. Just slightly is my faltered. Brave words for A. Done? Maybe. But not today, Bindinch, I faspal. Marlowe turned. The man stammered. Sir, he's right. It's gone. All of it. Every account, every transfer. It's public. Marlowe went still. Then he looked back at me. His voice was calm again, but quieter. Do you think this ends me? No, I said. It ends you having control. He stepped closer to the porch, the fog swirling around him. Then, I suppose we'll find out who breaks first. He turned, motioned for his men. They retreated wordlessly into the trees. Within minutes, the engines faded into the distance. Emily ran to the window. He's leaving. For now, I said. He's got bigger fires to put out. She collapsed into the chair, tears streaking her face. It's over, isn't it? I knelt beside her, took her hands. It's never over. But it's enough, for today. We stayed there until the fog lifted, until the first real light of morning touched the lake. When it did, I saw something I hadn't seen in her for years' peace. Fragile, fleeting, but real. A week later, we were gone. New names, new passports, a new life in a town so small it barely existed on maps. We worked odd jobs, paid in cash, spoke little of the past. Sometimes, when she laughed, I could almost believe it was done. But on quiet nights, when the wind rustled the trees just right, I could still hear the echo of his voice. You've caused me quite the inconvenience. And I'd wonder if somewhere out there, behind another name and another fortune, Marlowe was rebuilding. But then I'd look at my daughter alive. Breathing, free, and remember that sometimes survival is victory enough. We never found peace. Not really. But we found something better. We found an ending.